The last thing I expected at 60 years old was to be sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to gather the courage to walk into my own home. For 32 years, I had walked through that front door with my head held high, the respected director of product development at one of Boston's leading pharmaceutical companies. Today, the cardboard box on the passenger seat held all that remained of my career: a few photos, a coffee mug my team had given me for my 50th birthday, and a small potted plant that had somehow survived 2 office relocations. How do you tell your husband of 40 years that you've been discarded like yesterday's newspaper? How do you tell your successful children that their mother, the woman they'd always seen as invincible, had been deemed redundant? I didn't know it then, but being pushed out of next-gen pharmaceuticals would lead me down a path I never imagined possible. A path that would eventually bring me back through those same corporate doors, not as a desperate former employee, but as someone with enough power to make the entire executive team squirm in their ergonomic chairs. But that day in the parking lot, with tears blurring my vision, such a future seemed impossible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Bennett. People have called me Ellie my entire life, though in the professional world, I've always been Eleanor. Firm, clear, with no opportunity for diminutives or dismissal. I earned my doctorate in biochemistry from MIT in 1986, when women in science were still something of a curiosity. My thesis advisor had patted my shoulder during my defense and said, "You're quite good at this, for a woman who's planning to have a family." I'd been pregnant with my first child at the time, my rounded belly a clear indication of my supposedly divided priorities. I joined Morgan Pharmaceuticals in 1991, when it was still a scrappy startup operating out of a converted textile mill in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Back then, we were 20 employees with big dreams of changing healthcare through targeted medication development. James Morgan, our founder, was a brilliant scientist with a terrible head for business, but a wonderful vision: creating affordable, effective medications for conditions that larger pharmaceutical companies deemed unprofitable. Over 3 decades, I helped transform Morgan Pharmaceuticals into Next-Gen Pharmaceuticals, a respected mid-size company with over 400 employees and 5 flagship medications on the market. 3 of those medications had come directly from my development team. The migraine treatment we created in 2004 still generates over $200 million in annual revenue. The cardiovascular medication we launched in 2011 has saved countless lives. My husband Robert, a professor of English literature at Boston College, had always supported my career. When our children were young, he arranged his teaching schedule to be home when I couldn't be. He attended school events when clinical trials kept me working late. He never once complained about my long hours or the vacations cut short by work emergencies. We raised 2 children who grew into remarkable adults. Emma, now 36, followed in my scientific footsteps and works as a research physician at Johns Hopkins. Daniel, 33, took after his father and became a published novelist who teaches creative writing at NYU. They grew up understanding the importance of my work, proud to tell their friends that their mother helped develop medications that kept people alive. At home, I was still Ellie, the woman who occasionally burned dinner because she was lost in research papers, who could recite complex molecular structures but sometimes forgot to buy milk, who sang off-key while gardening on Sunday mornings when she wasn't at the lab checking on experiments. At work, I was Dr. Bennett, respected, occasionally feared, but always valued. Or so I thought. The signs of trouble began shortly after James Morgan retired and sold the company to a larger pharmaceutical conglomerate in 2020. They kept our name. NextGen had solid brand recognition in the industry, but gradually, the culture began to shift. Quarterly profits became the primary measure of success, rather than the impact of our medications on patients' lives. New executives appeared with Harvard MBAs but limited scientific knowledge, speaking a language of synergies and market optimization that seemed utterly disconnected from the work we were actually doing. William Parker became our new CEO in January 2023. He arrived from GlobalX Pharmaceuticals with a reputation for aggressive restructuring and cost-cutting. At 52, he was younger than me, with perfectly tailored suits and a smile that never reached his eyes. During his introduction to the executive team, he shook my hand a beat too briefly and called me Ellen, despite the nameplate clearly visible on my lapel. "We'll need to have a detailed conversation about your department's ROI," he said, already looking past me to the next person in line. "Some of these legacy projects seem to be dragging on our bottom line." A chill ran through me at the word legacy, a term I'd heard increasingly applied to both long-running projects and long-serving employees. In corporate speak, legacy was often code for outdated or in need of replacement. Over the following months, I watched as respected colleagues disappeared one by one. First went Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, our brilliant head of research who had been with the company for 27 years. His replacement was a 35-year-old from GlobalX who immediately canceled two of Dr. Tanaka's long-term research initiatives that had yet to show marketable results. Then, Patricia Coleman from Legal was offered early retirement. Janet Wu from Finance was restructured out of her position. Each time, their responsibilities were redistributed to younger, less experienced, and, not coincidentally, lower-paid employees. I began updating my resume for the first time in decades, but tried to stay optimistic. My department consistently delivered results. Our latest project, a promising treatment for peripheral neuropathy, was showing excellent results in Phase 2 clinical trials. Surely my 3 decades of successful drug development would count for something. I even tried to adapt to the new culture. I downloaded the productivity apps the younger managers were using. I taught myself to navigate the new project management system that had replaced our perfectly functional old one. I started wearing more modern frames for my glasses and updated my wardrobe. None of this came naturally to me, but I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. And then there was Michael Harris. I had hired Michael myself 12 years ago, fresh out of his postdoctoral fellowship. He was brilliant, ambitious, and I had mentored him personally, helping him navigate both the science and the corporate politics of pharmaceutical development. I had advocated for his promotions, celebrated his successes, defended him when early. Mistakes had nearly derailed his career. In recent months, I had noticed Michael spending more time with the new executive team. He was often seen in the corporate gym with William Parker, spotting him during weightlifting sessions. He began dressing differently, expensive watches, designer suits that mimicked Parker's style. His presentations started incorporating the same corporate buzzwords that Parker favored. "We need to pivot toward more agile development methodologies," he said during a team meeting, gesturing with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "The traditional pipeline is too rigid for today's dynamic market." I bit my tongue, knowing that our traditional pipeline had successfully brought multiple life-saving medications to market. But I also recognized the political winds were shifting. After the meeting, I invited Michael to coffee, hoping to bridge what felt like a widening gap. "You've come so far from that nervous postdoc I hired," I said warmly, trying to reestablish our connection. "I'm proud of how you've grown." Michael glanced at his smartwatch. "Thanks, Eleanor. I appreciate everything you've taught me, but I should get going. I have a meeting with William to discuss some ideas for departmental restructuring." The word restructuring hung in the air between us. He avoided my eyes as he gathered his things, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. The axe fell on a Tuesday morning in May. The calendar notification had appeared the previous evening. Meeting with W. Parker and HR, 9 a.m. executive conference room. I spent a restless night rehearsing arguments about the value I brought to the company, the institutional knowledge that would be lost, the projects that might falter without my guidance. I dressed carefully that morning, a charcoal gray suit. That projected authority. The pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. Comfortable but professional heels. I printed out the latest progress reports on our peripheral neuropathy treatment, complete with projected revenue once it reached market. William Parker didn't look at the reports. In fact, he barely looked at me. "Eleanor," he began. A folder closed on the table in front of him, the HR director seated silently beside him. "You've been an important part of NextGen's history, and we value your contributions over the years." The past tense wasn't subtle. I felt my throat tighten. "As you know, we've been evaluating all departments for operational efficiency and future growth potential. After careful consideration, we've decided to eliminate the Director of Product Development position as part of our restructuring." I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Michael Harris will be taking on leadership of the development team as part of his new role as Vice President of Innovation and Pipeline Management. Of course, a new title, probably a corner office, and undoubtedly a salary that, while substantial, would still be less than what they were paying me. The HR director slid documents across the table. Severance agreement, non-disclosure forms, information about continuation of benefits. 6 months of salary. 4 months of health insurance. An invitation to the company's upcoming 35th anniversary celebration as a distinguished former leader. "This isn't about your performance, Eleanor," William added, as if this would somehow soften the blow. "This is about positioning NextGen for the future. We're moving toward a more integrated, nimble organizational structure." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The word future hung in the air, the unspoken implication being that at 60, I wasn't part of it. "I understand," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "May I have some time to review these documents?" "Of course," William replied, finally meeting my eyes. "Take the rest of the week. Joanne from HR will help you clear out your office this afternoon." And just like that, 32 years of dedication were reduced to an afternoon of packing under supervision. As I gathered my personal items, colleagues stopped by. Some genuinely distressed, others clearly uncomfortable, a few already adjusting to the new power dynamic. Michael appeared briefly, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Eleanor, I just heard. I'm so sorry. This wasn't my decision." It wasn't a lie, technically. The decision had been William's, but Michael had positioned himself perfectly to benefit from it. "Take care of the team," I said simply. "And don't abandon the peripheral neuropathy project. It could help millions of people." He nodded solemnly, but his eyes were already focused on my office. His office now, measuring for new furniture perhaps, or planning where to hang his degrees and awards. By 3 o'clock, my career had been reduced to the contents of a standard-size cardboard box. Joanne from HR walked me to my car, took my security badge, and offered a practiced expression of sympathy. "The company will be making an announcement tomorrow," she said. "In the meantime, we ask that you refer any questions to HR." I nodded numbly, placed the box on my passenger seat, and sat staring through the windshield long after she had returned to the building. The parking space designated Dr. E. Bennett, director, would probably have a new name by morning. The drive home to our colonial house in Newton took 40 minutes in mid-afternoon traffic. Each mile brought fresh anxiety about telling Robert. He would be supportive, of course. He always was. But I dreaded the look of concern that would cross his face, the careful calculation he would do regarding our finances, the retirement we had planned based on my continued income for at least 5 more years. Our driveway was empty when I arrived home. Robert was likely still on campus. He had late office hours on Tuesdays. I was simultaneously relieved and disappointed. Part of me wanted to get the conversation over with. Another part was grateful. For a few hours to collect myself. I carried my box into the house and set it on the kitchen counter. The silence was unsettling. For 3 decades, I had rarely been home at this hour on a weekday. The afternoon light streamed through windows at an angle I wasn't accustomed to seeing, casting unfamiliar shadows across our living room. I moved through the house in a daze, changing from my professional attire into jeans and one of Robert's old Boston College sweatshirts. In our home office, I stared at the framed photos on the wall, my PhD graduation standing proudly between my beaming parents, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for NextGen's research facility in 2008, receiving the Women in Pharmaceutical Innovation Award in 2015, a lifetime of achievement that had culminated in being escorted from the building with a box of personal effects. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How's the Wonder Woman of Pharma today? Just finished rounds and thinking of you. Love you, Mom." My fingers hovered over the screen. What could I say? "Actually, darling, I've been terminated. Your brilliant, accomplished mother is now unemployed at 60. I couldn't bring myself to type the words. Instead, I set the phone down without responding. Robert arrived home just after 5, his leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder, reading glasses perched on top of his silver hair. After 40 years of marriage, his face still lit up when he saw me, though today that expression quickly shifted to confusion. "Ellie, what are you doing home so early? Are you feeling all right?" I stood in our kitchen, leaning against the counter where the cardboard box sat like a silent accusation. "I lost my job today," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Robert's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, anger, concern. "They let you go? After everything you've done for that company?" He set down his bag and crossed the room to me. "What happened?" "Restructuring," I said, the corporate euphemism tasting bitter. "My position has been eliminated. Michael, Harris is taking over my team with a fancy new title." Robert wrapped his arms around me, and I finally let the tears come. Great, heaving sobs that I had held back all day. He held me silently, one hand stroking my hair until the storm passed. "They're making a huge mistake," he said finally. "You're the best they have." "Apparently not," I replied, wiping my eyes. "Apparently I'm an obsolete model." "That's nonsense," Robert said firmly. "You're at the top of your field. Any pharmaceutical company would be lucky to have you." His confidence warmed me, though. I wasn't sure I shared it. The pharmaceutical industry, like many others, had developed a youth obsession in recent years. Experience was valued less than innovation and fresh perspectives, often code for younger, less expensive employees, comfortable with the latest technologies and management trends. "Let's open that bottle of Barolo we've been saving," Robert suggested. "I think we could both use a glass. Then we'll figure out next steps. Together, like we always do." As we sat at our kitchen table, Robert helped me begin processing the practical implications. My severance would cover us for 6 months. Our mortgage was nearly paid off. Our retirement accounts were healthy, though we had planned to bolster them significantly over the next 5 years. Emma and Daniel were financially independent, so at least we didn't have those concerns. "You'll find something else," Robert assured me, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "With your experience and track record, companies will be lining up to hire you." I nodded, wanting to believe him, but a nagging voice in my head whispered doubts. Who would hire a 60-year-old woman in an industry increasingly dominated by younger executives? Would I need to accept a significant step down in position and compensation? Could I handle the humiliation of reporting to someone half my age after decades of leadership? After dinner, we called Emma and Daniel on a video chat to break the lie. News. Their immediate reactions were outrage on my behalf. "That's age discrimination," Emma fumed, her doctor's white coat visible in the hospital break room where she had taken the call. "You should sue them." "They structured it very carefully," I explained. Officially, they eliminated the position, not me personally. Hard. To prove discrimination. Daniel's writer's imagination immediately leapt to possibilities. This could be an opportunity, Mom. You've always talked about wanting to write a book about drug development. Or you could consult for multiple companies instead of being tied to just one. I appreciated their support, but I could also see the concern behind their encouraging words. My children had grown up seeing me as the consummate professional, the scientist whose work saved lives, the executive who commanded respect. This sudden change in status clearly unsettled them, though they tried to hide it. I'll be fine, I assured them. I just need some time to figure out my next move. After we ended the call, I sat in the quiet of our living room, the reality of my situation finally sinking in. For 32 years, my identity had been inextricably linked to my work at Next Gen. Dr. Eleanor Bennett, Director of Product Development, the woman whose team developed life-changing medications, the mentor who guided dozens of young scientists to successful careers. Who was I now? Robert found me still sitting there an hour later, staring at nothing. "Come to bed, love," he said gently. "Things will look clearer in the morning." But as I lay awake beside his sleeping form, clarity seemed very far away. I kept replaying moments from my career, wondering if I had missed signs that should have warned me, if I could have done anything differently to secure my position. I thought about Michael, whom I had trusted and mentored, stepping into my role without hesitation. Most of all, I wondered what I would do next. At 60, was I truly finished? Was this unceremonious dismissal the end of my professional story? I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows. Robert had already risen. I could smell coffee brewing downstairs. For a blissful moment, I thought perhaps yesterday had been a bad dream. Then reality crashed back, and I felt a heaviness in my chest. No meetings to attend today, no clinical trial results to review, no team looking to me for guidance, just an empty day stretching ahead, the first of many. I forced myself to get up, shower, and dress in casual clothes, an unfamiliar routine for a Wednesday morning. Downstairs, Robert had prepared breakfast and was reading student papers at the kitchen table. "I've canceled my afternoon class," he announced as I poured coffee. "I thought we could do something together. Maybe take a walk at the arboretum. The rhododendrons are blooming." His kindness nearly undid me. "You don't need to change your schedule for me," I protested. "I'm perfectly capable of occupying myself." "I know that," he said, setting down his red pen. "But I'd like to spend the day with my wife. Is that so strange?" It wasn't strange, but it was unfamiliar. For decades, our weekday lives had run on parallel tracks, intersecting in the evenings, and on weekends. This new reality, where I suddenly had endless free time while he maintained his busy academic schedule, would require adjustment from both of us. After breakfast, I found myself wandering through our house, noticing things I had overlooked in the rush of daily life. The reading nook in the sunroom needed new cushions. The garden outside had been neglected this spring. Books I had bought, with good intentions, sat unread on shelves. Was this to be my life now? Domestic projects and leisure reading? The thought filled me with a restless anxiety. By mid-morning, I couldn't stand the quiet anymore. I sat down at my computer and began crafting emails to colleagues at other pharmaceutical companies. People I had collaborated with over the years, former employees who had moved on to other firms, professional acquaintances from conferences, and industry events. I kept the messages brief and dignified, simply stating that I was exploring new opportunities and would appreciate any leads or connections they might offer. I updated my LinkedIn profile, cringing slightly as I changed my employment status. Within minutes, notifications began appearing, mostly messages of surprise and support from colleagues. A few recruitment agencies also reached out, promising to help me find my next exciting role. One message stood out from the others. Dr. Vivian Chen, a former postdoc from my team who now served as research director at Alden Biotech, responded almost immediately, "Eleanor, I just heard through the grapevine. NextGen's loss should be someone else's gain. We have several projects that could benefit from your expertise. Can you meet for lunch this week to discuss potential opportunities?" A spark of hope ignited. Alden was smaller than NextGen, but had a solid reputation for innovation in targeted therapeutics. Working with Vivian, whom I had mentored years ago, would be a fitting next chapter. When Robert returned from his morning class, I shared the lunch invitation with him. "That's wonderful," he said, genuine relief in his voice. "I told you companies would be interested." We spent the afternoon at the Arnold Arboretum as he had suggested, walking among the flowering trees and talking about possibilities. For the first time since leaving William Parker's office with my cardboard box, I felt a glimmer of optimism. Perhaps this wasn't an ending, but a transition. Perhaps there was still valuable work ahead for me. That evening, Emma called again. "How are you doing, Mom?" she asked, her doctor's eyes scanning my face through the video chat, looking for signs of distress. "Better today," I said truthfully. "I've already got a lunch meeting with Vivian Chen at Alden Biotech, and several other contacts have reached out." "That's great," Emma said, though something in her tone seemed cautious. "Just don't rush into anything, okay? Take some time to think about what you really want. Maybe this is a chance to scale back. Enjoy life a bit more." I frowned slightly. "Scale back? I'm not ready for retirement, Emma." I know, she backpedaled. "I just mean, you've worked so hard for so long. Maybe a position with less pressure, fewer hours would be good for you and Dad at this stage." At this stage. The words grated, though I knew she meant well. "I'll consider all options," I said neutrally. After we hung up, Daniel called. Like his sister, he expressed support for my job prospects while subtly suggesting I might want to consider a less demanding role. "You've always said you wanted more time for travel, for visiting us," he reminded me. "Maybe a part-time consulting role would give you that flexibility." By the time Robert and I went to bed, I had a nagging suspicion that my children had discussed me between themselves, probably with genuine concern, but also with unspoken assumptions about what was appropriate for someone at my stage. "They mean well," Robert said when I shared my frustration. "They just want you to be happy." "I know," I sighed. "But they're already treating me like I'm somehow diminished, like being 60 means I should gracefully step aside and focus on gardening and grandchildren we don't even have yet." Robert pulled me close. "Then show them they're wrong. Show everyone they're wrong." I fell asleep with his words echoing in my mind. Show them they're wrong. But how? My lunch with Vivian Chen 2 days later started promisingly. She greeted me warmly at a sleek restaurant near Alden Biotech's Cambridge headquarters, and for the first half hour, we caught up on her career since leaving my team. She had done remarkably well, rising quickly to her current position with several patented formulations to her name. I felt a teacher's pride in her accomplishments. When the conversation turned to potential opportunities at Alden, however, I sensed a subtle shift in her demeanor. "We have a senior scientific advisor position that might be perfect for you," she said, carefully unfolding her napkin. "It's part-time, about 20 hours a week, supporting various research teams with your expertise." I took a sip of water, processing this information. An advisory role? Not a leadership position? Vivian hesitated. "Our development teams already have directors in place, but your experience would be invaluable in a consulting capacity." Advisory, consulting, support. The words felt like gentle nudges toward a professional off-ramp. "What about the monoclonal antibody project you mentioned in your email?" I asked. You indicated there were development challenges. Yes, we've hit some roadblocks, she admitted. And your input would certainly help. But Eleanor, she leaned forward, dropping her voice. I want to be transparent. Our executive team is concerned about bringing in someone at your level of experience for a full-time leadership role. They're worried about longevity, about how long you'd want to stay before retirement. There it was. The unspoken bias laid bare. I was too old to invest in, too close to an arbitrary finish line to be worth the commitment of a leadership position. I maintained my composure through the remainder of lunch, discussing the advisory role in appropriate detail and promising to consider it. But inside, something hardened, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. When I arrived home, Robert was waiting, expectantly. How did it go? I dropped my purse on the counter with more force than necessary. They offered me a part-time advisory position, 20 hours a week of sharing my wisdom without any actual authority or leadership responsibility. Robert's face fell. I'm sorry, Ellie. Vivian was very kind about it, I continued, pacing the kitchen. Talked about valuing my experience while simultaneously making it clear they don't want to invest in someone my age for a real position. That's their loss, Robert said firmly. Is it? I stopped pacing and faced him. Or is it just the reality I need to accept? Maybe Emma and Daniel are right. Maybe at 60, I should be grateful for whatever professional scraps are thrown my way and focus on becoming a proper grandmother someday. That doesn't sound like the Eleanor Bennett I married, Robert said quietly. The woman I know doesn't accept limitations placed on her by others. I sank into a kitchen chair. The Eleanor Bennett you married was 30 years younger and hadn't just been professionally humiliated. Robert sat across from me, taking my hands in his. What do you really want, Ellie? Not what you think you should accept. What do you want? The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Not just a job, not just a title or a paycheck. What did I truly want from whatever professional life remained to me? I want to finish what I started, I said finally. The peripheral neuropathy treatment at NextGen. It could help millions of people suffering from diabetic nerve pain, chemotherapy side effects, autoimmune conditions. It was my project, my vision. And now Michael will probably rush it through development to score quick wins, cutting corners on safety protocols. So you're concerned about the science, about the patients, Robert observed. Yes, I said, then paused. But I'm also angry. I'm angry that 32 years of dedication ended with a cardboard box and a security escort. I'm angry that younger, less experienced people are making decisions about medications that could help or harm thousands of patients. I'm angry that everyone, NextGen, Alden, even our own children, seems to think I should quietly disappear into irrelevance. A flush rose to my cheeks as the anger I'd been suppressing finally found voice. Robert watched me with a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. There she is, he said softly. There's my Ellie. I took a deep breath. I need to think. The next morning, while Robert was teaching, I retreated to our home office and closed the door. On the wall hung my diplomas, awards, and framed photos from key moments in my career. I studied them, remembering the challenges I had overcome, the barriers I had broken. Below my desk sat several boxes of research materials and notes I had accumulated over the years, copies of data I had legally brought home from NextGen, articles I had written, presentations I had given at conferences. I began sorting through them, looking for something specific. In the third box, I found what I was seeking. A leather portfolio containing notes and preliminary research on a computational model I had developed 5 years ago for predicting drug interactions based on molecular structure. The pharmaceutical industry relied on expensive, time-consuming laboratory testing to identify potential drug interactions. My model could potentially reduce that time and cost by 60%, allowing for faster development of new medications while maintaining safety standards. I had worked on this model in my spare time, careful to use only publicly available data and my personal equipment to avoid any conflicts with my next-gen employment agreement. I had presented an early version at a conference where it had generated significant interest. But NextGen's previous leadership had been focused on other priorities. I had continued refining the model during evenings and weekends, seeing it as a hobby project that might someday have value. Now, I looked at it with fresh eyes. This wasn't just a hobby project. This was potentially transformative technology for the entire pharmaceutical industry. I powered up my personal laptop and spent the next several hours reviewing my notes, examining the algorithms, testing the model against published drug interaction data. It worked even better than I remembered, particularly with the refinements I had made over the years. When Robert returned home that afternoon, he found me surrounded by papers, my eyes bright with excitement. "You look like you've had a breakthrough," he observed, leaning against the doorframe. "I think I have," I replied, gesturing him over to look at my computer screen. "Do you remember the predictive model I was working on a few years ago? The one for drug interactions?" "Vaguely," he admitted. "You used to mutter about algorithms while brushing your teeth." I laughed. "Well, it works, Robert. It really works. Look at these validation tests against known drug interactions." I scrolled through several datasets. The model predicted these interactions with 92% accuracy. That's significantly better than current screening methods. Robert studied the screen, then looked at me. "So what does this mean?" "It means," I said slowly, the idea crystallizing as I spoke, "that I might have something valuable here. Something that doesn't require NextGen or Alden or anyone else to give me permission to continue my work." "You're thinking of commercializing it yourself?" Robert's eyebrows rose. "Starting a company at 60? "Why not?" I challenged. Colonel Sanders was 65 when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. Vera Wang didn't design her first dress until she was 40. Laura Ingalls Wilder published her first book at 65. "I'm not questioning whether you could do it," Robert clarified. "I'm just surprised. You've always been part of established institutions, universities, pharmaceutical companies. This would be very different." He was right. Throughout my career, I had worked within existing structures, pushing boundaries, but ultimately operating within organizational frameworks. Starting something entirely my own would be a dramatic departure. "I'd need help," I acknowledged. "Funding, business expertise, marketing. I know the science, but not how to build a company." "You know people," Robert pointed out. "Former colleagues, industry contacts. And you have me. I may be an English professor, but I know how to research. We can learn what we need to know." For the next week, I immersed myself in research. Not pharmaceutical research, but business research. I read about startup funding, business plans, intellectual property protection, regulatory requirements for health tech companies. I reached out to former colleagues who had moved into entrepreneurial roles, asking careful questions without revealing too much about my own project. One name kept coming up in these conversations: Dr. Rebecca Goldman, a former pharmaceutical executive who had successfully transitioned to venture capital, specializing in healthcare innovation. I had met her at several industry conferences over the years, and we had served together on a panel about women in pharmaceutical leadership. I composed a careful email requesting a meeting to discuss a potential healthcare technology venture. Her response came the same day. "Eleanor, intrigued by your message. Always happy to meet with someone of your caliber. Coffee next Tuesday at Thinking Cup near Boston Common? 10 a.m.? The following Tuesday, I dressed in professional attire, for the first time since leaving NextGen. As I fastened my pearl necklace, I caught Robert watching me from the doorway. "You look like yourself again," he said with approval. "I feel like myself again," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. Rebecca Goldman was already seated when I arrived at the coffee shop, her silver hair cut in a sleek bob, her posture impeccable. She rose to greet me with a warm handshake. "Eleanor, it's been too long. I was sorry to hear about the situation at NextGen. Their short-sightedness is breathtaking." "Word travels fast," I observed, taking the seat across from her. "It's a small industry," she replied, "and people notice when someone of your stature is pushed aside." She gestured to a waiting cappuccino. "I took the liberty of ordering for you. I remembered from that conference in Chicago that you prefer cappuccino to regular coffee." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "I appreciate you meeting with me." "Your email mentioned a healthcare technology venture," Rebecca said, leaning forward slightly. "I'd love to hear more." For the next 30 minutes, I explained my predictive model for drug interactions, its development, validation testing, potential applications, and market implications. Rebecca listened intently, asking occasional sharp questions that demonstrated her grasp of both the science and business potential. When I finished, she sat back and studied me over the rim of her coffee cup. "This is impressive, Eleanor. Very impressive. The potential time and cost savings for pharmaceutical companies would be substantial, not to mention the safety implications for patients." "Thank you," I said. "I believe it could transform the drug development process." "So do I," she agreed. "The question is, what do you want to do with it? License the technology to an existing company? Develop it further yourself? Start a company around it?" I took a deep breath. "I want to build something myself. Something that can't be taken away from me because someone decides I'm too old or too expensive. Something that could be my professional legacy." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Starting a company at our age isn't the traditional path. But then, neither of us has ever been particularly traditional, have we?" "Our age." The simple acknowledgement that she saw herself in the same category as me, rather than placing me in some diminished senior category, was refreshing. "The model is ready for commercialization," I continued. "It needs a user-friendly interface, cloud-based accessibility, and proper validation documentation for regulatory compliance. But the core technology works." "What about funding?" Rebecca asked. "Development costs, staff, marketing, you'd need significant capital." "That's partly why I wanted to meet with you," I admitted. "I have some savings I could invest, but not enough to fully launch a company, and I need guidance on the business aspects. I'm a scientist, not an entrepreneur." Rebecca tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. "Meridian Ventures, my firm, specializes in exactly this kind of opportunity. Healthcare innovation with solid science behind it." She pulled out her phone and checked her calendar. "I want you to present this to my partners. Can you prepare a formal pitch for next Monday morning?" My heart raced. "Yes, of course." "Good. I'll send you our pitch guidelines." She put her phone away and fixed me with a penetrating look. "Eleanor, starting a company is all-consuming. The hours are grueling, the stress is constant, and success is never guaranteed. At our age, most people are thinking about slowing down, not ramping up." "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Us?" It was a fair question. The same one my children would undoubtedly ask, probably with even more concern. "I've spent my entire career developing medications to help people live better, longer lives," I said. "But I've always done it within systems created by others, playing by rules I didn't make. This is my chance to create something entirely my own, something that reflects my values and vision. If not now, when?" Rebecca smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you would say. Send me your existing documentation on the model this afternoon. I'll review it before the full pitch." As we parted outside the coffee shop, Rebecca clasped my hand firmly. "Whatever happens with Meridian, don't give up on this, Eleanor. The world doesn't get to tell us when we're finished. I walked back to my car with a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since leaving William Parker's office with my cardboard box, I had a clear path forward. Not a retreat, not a diminished role suited to my stage, but something bold and new. That evening, I shared the developments with Robert over dinner. His face lit up as I described Rebecca's reaction and the invitation to pitch to her venture capital firm. "This is happening, isn't it?" he said, pouring more wine into both our glasses. "My wife, the entrepreneur." "It might be happening," I cautioned. "There's no guarantee Meridian will fund the project." "They'd be fools not to," Robert declared. "And if they pass, we'll find another way. We can take out a home equity loan if necessary." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "I appreciate your confidence in me, but this is risky. Starting a company at my age, taking on established players in the pharmaceutical industry. Are you sure you're comfortable with this?" Robert set down his wine glass. "Ellie, do you remember what you said to me 20 years ago, when I was agonizing over whether to write that book on modern interpretations of Milton? When I was convinced it was too late, that all the important scholarship had already been done?" I smiled at the memory. "I told you that if it mattered to you, you should do it. That meaningful work doesn't have an expiration date." "Exactly," he nodded. "Now I'm telling you the same thing. This matters to you. It could help countless patients, and it's never too late to do work that matters." We clinked glasses, partners in this new adventure as we had been in everything else for 40 years. The next morning, I woke early and immediately went to my computer. I spent the day refining my pitch presentation, creating clear visual representations of the model's performance, and articulating the business potential in terms that would resonate with investors. As I worked, I felt a mounting excitement. This wasn't just a response to being pushed out of NextGen. This was something I had been building toward my entire career. All my knowledge, experience, and scientific insight culminating in a technology that could genuinely improve healthcare outcomes. When Emma called that evening for our now daily check-in, I hesitated before sharing my news. I anticipated her concern, her gentle suggestions that perhaps I should consider something less demanding. "Mom?" she prompted when I fell silent. "Everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I have some exciting news. I'm meeting with Meridian Ventures on Monday to pitch a healthcare technology company based on my predictive modeling work." A beat of silence. "A company? You're starting a company?" "That's the plan," I confirmed. "If I can secure funding." "Wow," Emma said, her surprise evident. "That's ambitious." "Is that your diplomatic way of saying it's inappropriate for someone my age?" I asked, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. No, not at all," she backpedaled. "I'm just surprised. I thought you'd be looking for something. I don't know, more established. More suitable for someone entering their twilight years?" I suggested dryly. "Mom, that's not fair," Emma protested. "I'm just concerned about the stress and workload of launching a startup. It's grueling for people half your age." "I'm 60, Emma, not 90, I replied. "My brain works perfectly well, my health is excellent, and I have decades of experience that most startup founders don't have." I know, she said quickly. "And if anyone can do it, you can. I worry about you, that's all." I softened slightly. "I appreciate your concern, but I need your support on this, not your worry. This is important to me." "You have my support," she promised. "Always. I'll even be your first customer if you need one." After we hung up, I sat with my thoughts for a long moment. Emma's reaction was likely just the first of many. People would question my decision, doubt my capacity, wonder if I was having some sort of age-related crisis. Even well-meaning supporters might secretly believe I was taking on too much. Let them think what they want, I decided. I knew what I was capable of, and I was just getting started. The weekend before my pitch to Meridian Ventures was a flurry of preparation. Robert cleared his schedule to help me refine my presentation, playing devil's advocate as I rehearsed answers to potential investor questions. We converted our dining room into a war room, with charts, market analyses, and competitor research taped to the walls. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly alive, challenged, purposeful, utilizing every bit of my accumulated knowledge and experience. On Sunday evening, Daniel called. I answered with my phone on speaker as I made final adjustments to my slide deck. "Hey, Mom, how's the job hunt going?" His voice held the careful cheer of someone speaking to a hospital patient. I paused, cursor, hovering over my laptop screen. "Actually, I'm not job hunting anymore. I've decided to start my own company." The silence that followed was so pronounced I checked to make sure we hadn't lost the connection. "Daniel, are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here." He cleared his throat. "Did you say you're starting a company?" "That's right. I'm pitching to Meridian Ventures tomorrow morning." "Meridian, that's Rebecca Goldman's firm, right? The pharmaceutical VC?" "Yes." I was mildly surprised he knew of it. "I'm commercializing my predictive modeling technology for drug interactions. We're calling it Interact RX." Another pause. I could almost hear him processing this unexpected information. "Wow, that's really something, Mom." His voice was carefully neutral. "Have you discussed this with Emma?" "Briefly," I admitted. "She had concerns about the workload." "Yeah, well..." Daniel hesitated. "Starting a company is intense. The statistics on startup failures are pretty grim, even for founders with business backgrounds. And the stress." "I'm well aware of the challenges," I cut in, an edge creeping into my voice. "I've been researching this thoroughly." "I'm sure you have," he backpedaled. "I just want to make sure you're not doing this as some kind of reaction to what happened at NextGen. There are other options that wouldn't require building something from scratch at my age?" I finished for him. "I didn't say that," he protested. "But it's what you meant." I saved my presentation and closed my laptop with more force than necessary. "Daniel, I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. This technology has the potential to transform pharmaceutical development and benefit countless patients. If I were 40, no one would question my commitment or capacity to bring it to market." "Mom, that's not fair. I just want you to be happy and not overtaxed." "And who gets to define what's too taxing for me?" I challenged. "You? Emma? Society's preconceptions about 60-year-old women?" Robert, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, stepped into the room and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Daniel," he said, leaning toward the phone, "your mother has my full support in this venture. The science is sound, the market opportunity is substantial, and if anyone can build a successful company around this technology, it's Eleanor Bennett." I felt a rush of gratitude for his unwavering belief in me. "Of course," Daniel said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I worry, that's all." After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. Why is it so hard for them to see me as capable? Robert pulled up a chair beside me. "They've never seen you vulnerable before. You've always been the unshakable one, the achiever, the problem solver. This adjustment is difficult for them. It's difficult for me too," I admitted. "But I'm not sitting around waiting for someone to rescue me. I'm building something new." "That's why I love you," Robert said, squeezing my hand. "You've never needed rescuing." Monday morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect May day in Boston. I dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit, modest heels, pearl earrings that had been my mother's. Professional, but not trying too hard to look younger than my years. My silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. "Look formidable," Robert approved as he handed me a travel mug of coffee for the drive. "That's the goal," I replied, checking my briefcase one last time for presentation materials. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," he said, kissing me at the door. "You've got science and experience on your side." Meridian Ventures occupied the top floor of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. As the elevator whisked me upward, I took deep, measured breaths to steady my nerves. I hadn't felt this combination of anxiety and excitement since defending my doctoral thesis decades ago. Rebecca met me in the lobby, elegant in a charcoal pantsuit, her silver bob gleaming under the recessed lighting. "Ready to dazzle my partners?" she asked, leading me toward a conference room. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The conference room contained a horseshoe-shaped table where 7 people sat waiting, 4 men and 3 women, all somewhere between 40 and 65, all with the sharp-eyed assessment of successful investors. Rebecca introduced me briefly, emphasizing my background and scientific credentials, then nodded for me to begin. For the next 30 minutes, I presented my vision for InteractRx, the technology behind the predictive modeling, the market needed addressed, the competitive advantages it offered, and the potential returns on investment. I outlined a 3-year growth strategy, including staffing plans, regulatory approach, and marketing targets. When I finished, the questions began. Incisive, challenging, occasionally skeptical. How would we protect the intellectual property? What about regulatory approval? Who were our potential competitors? How would we price the service? What if large pharmaceutical companies developed similar technology in-house? I answered each question directly, drawing on my decades of industry knowledge. Where I didn't have a specific answer, I acknowledged the gap and outlined how we would address it. Finally, an older man at the end of the table, introduced earlier as Harold Levinson, a founding partner, leaned forward. "Dr. Bennett, your scientific credentials are impeccable and the technology is compelling. But I have to ask, why take this on now? Starting a company is a 5 to 10-year commitment at minimum. Most people at your stage are thinking about stepping back, not diving into the most challenging form of business endeavor." At my stage, there it was again, that subtle categorization, the implied countdown clock on my productive years. "Mr. Levinson," I replied, maintaining steady eye contact, "I've spent 32 years developing medications that help people live longer, healthier lives. Some of those medications have extended people's productive years by decades. It would be rather ironic if I believed those extra years shouldn't be fully utilized, wouldn't it?" A ripple of appreciative chuckles moved around the table. "Moreover," I continued, "this technology represents the culmination of my life's work. It has the potential to transform drug development, making medications safer and more accessible. I'm not interested in stepping back when I have the opportunity to make such a significant contribution." "And your age gives you certain advantages," Rebecca added. "Decades of industry connections, deep scientific knowledge, and the perspective that comes with experience. These are valuable assets for a founder." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Fair points. Thank you for your candor, Dr. Bennett." After a few more questions, Rebecca escorted me back to the lobby while the partners deliberated. "You were impressive in there," she said as we waited for the elevator. "They're not easy to impress." "Thank you," I replied. "When might I hear their decision?" "We move quickly at Meridian. I'll call you by tomorrow afternoon." She shook my hand firmly. "Whatever happens, Eleanor, you've given me something to think about regarding how we evaluate founder potential. Age shouldn't be a liability." The elevator arrived, and as I stepped in, Rebecca added, "Oh, and Eleanor, win or lose with Meridian, don't give up. This is too important." I drove home with my mind racing, analyzing every question, every reaction from the partners. Had I been convincing enough? Had my age been a disqualifying factor despite my arguments? To the contrary. Robert was waiting anxiously when I arrived. How did it go? Well, I said cautiously. They asked tough questions, but seemed engaged with the concept. We'll know tomorrow. That evening, we deliberately avoided discussion of the pitch, instead watching a documentary about Renaissance art that Robert had recorded for his class. It was a welcome distraction, though I found myself checking my phone reflexively throughout the evening. I slept poorly, waking frequently to check the time. By morning, I was irritable with anticipation. I tried to occupy myself with housework, then reading, then garden planning, anything to keep from staring at the phone. At 1:37 p.m., it finally rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Eleanor," she began without preamble. "The partners were impressed with your presentation and the technology. We'd like to make an initial investment of $5 million to fund InteractRx through its first 18 months of development and initial market entry." My knees went weak. I sank into the nearest chair. "That's wonderful news." "There are conditions, of course," Rebecca continued. "We'll want a board seat, detailed milestone reports, and veto power over major expenditures. Standard terms for an early-stage investment. My assistant will email the full term sheet this afternoon." "Thank you, Rebecca," I managed, "for believing in this, in me." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, a smile in her voice. "The hard part is just beginning. Can you come in tomorrow to meet with our legal team and start the paperwork?" After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. I had funding. I was going to build a company. At 60 years old, I was embarking on the most ambitious professional project of my life. When Robert came home from campus an hour later, I was still sitting in the same spot, a dazed smile on my face. "Ellie?" he prompted anxiously. "Did you hear from Meridian?" $2.5 million, I said, looking up at him. "They're investing $2.5 million in InteractRx." His face broke into a wide grin. "They funded you. I knew they would." He pulled me to my feet and into a tight embrace. "My brilliant wife, the startup founder." "I can't quite believe it," I admitted, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "At 60, I'm starting over." "Not starting over," he corrected, drawing back to look at me. "Evolving, building on everything you've accomplished so far." We celebrated that evening with champagne and takeout from our favorite Italian restaurant. As we raised our glasses, Robert proposed a toast. "To Eleanor Bennett, who refuses to be limited by anyone's expectations but her own." The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. With Meridian's backing, I secured office space in a biotech incubator near Kendall Square, filed provisional patents on the technology, and began recruiting a small team of developers and scientists to refine and expand the predictive modeling platform. My first hire was Dr. Samira Patel, a brilliant computational biologist who had worked briefly on my team at NextGen before being laid off in an earlier round of restructuring. At 35, she brought both scientific expertise and youthful energy to the venture. When I called to offer her the position of Chief Scientific Officer, her enthusiasm was infectious. "Dr. Bennett, I can't tell you how excited I am about this opportunity," she gushed. "Your predictive modeling work is groundbreaking. I've been following your research since graduate school." "Please call me Eleanor," I said. "We're building this together." Next came Jeremy Kaczynski, a software engineer with experience in healthcare applications, who would serve as our Chief Technology Officer. At 42, he had already been part of 2 successful startups and brought valuable technical and business experience. He took the job despite a significant pay cut from his previous position, telling me simply, "This technology could change lives. I want to be part of that." Rebecca introduced me to Maya Washington, a sharp marketing executive with pharmaceutical industry experience, who agreed to join as our business development lead. And finally, I hired Zoe Chen, a recent MBA graduate, as our operations manager, young, energetic, and eager to learn. By July, Interact RX was a real company with 5 full-time employees working out of our modest office space. Our days were long and chaotic, our to-do lists seemingly endless, but there was an exhilarating sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as I was working late refining some algorithms, Samira stopped by my office. "Eleanor, it's almost 9. Shouldn't you be heading home?" I glanced up, surprised by the time. I lost track. "Just trying to solve this computational bottleneck." Samira hesitated, then sat down across from me. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "How do you do it? The energy, the focus, the drive? It's remarkable. Most people would be coasting at this point in their careers, not starting something this ambitious." I considered her question carefully. "I suppose I don't see age as relevant to intellectual capacity or creative potential. The science excites me just as much now as it did 30 years ago. Maybe more because I have the context to appreciate its significance." Samira nodded thoughtfully. "I hope I still have that fire when I'm your age." "You will," I assured her, "if you never let others define what you're capable of." As she left, I reflected on how differently my young team viewed me compared to Next Gen's leadership, or even my own children. To them, my age represented accumulated wisdom and experience, not obsolescence. It was refreshing to be valued rather than dismissed. The first major test of our technology came in August, when we secured a pilot agreement with Veritas Pharmaceuticals, a mid-size company developing treatments for autoimmune disorders. They agreed to run our predictive model alongside their traditional interaction testing for a new compound in development. The stakes were high. If our model accurately predicted the interaction profile, it would provide crucial validation for our approach. If it failed, our credibility would be severely damaged. For 2 weeks, we worked intensively to calibrate the model for Veritas's specific compound class. I slept little, often working past midnight and returning to the office by 7 the next morning. Robert brought dinner to the office most evenings, sitting quietly in the corner reading student papers while I worked. When Veritas finally ran the comparison tests, the results exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Our model predicted 94% of the actual interactions identified through traditional laboratory testing, including 3 potentially dangerous interactions that might have been missed in early screening phases. Dr. Alan Reeves, Veritas's head of development, called me personally to discuss the results. "Dr. Bennett, this is remarkable technology. You've done in 2 weeks what would normally take us 2 months at a fraction of the cost. We want to discuss a broader implementation across our development pipeline." That evening, the Interact RX team celebrated at a restaurant near our office. As champagne flowed, I looked around at these talented people who had taken a chance. On my vision, Samira's brilliant scientific mind, Jeremy's technical genius, Maya's strategic thinking, Zoe's organizational skills. Together, we were building something that could genuinely improve pharmaceutical development and patient safety. "A toast," I proposed, raising my glass. "To all of you who believed in this venture when it was just an idea. Your talent and dedication made today's success possible. And to our fearless founder," Jeremy countered, raising his own glass, "who proves that innovation has no age limit." By September, word of our successful pilot with Veritas had spread through industry channels. 3 more pharmaceutical companies reached out to discuss potential partnerships. Rebecca and the Meridian team were delighted with our progress, already talking about a second round of funding at a significantly higher valuation. It was during this period of mounting success that I received an unexpected email. "Dr. Bennett, hope you are well. Would appreciate the opportunity to connect regarding a mutual professional matter." Available at your convenience. Regards, William Parker, CEO, NextGen Pharmaceuticals. I stared at the message on my phone screen, a complex mixture of emotions, washing over me. 4 months ago, this man had dismissed me as obsolete, unnecessary to NextGen's future. Now he wanted to connect. My first instinct was to ignore the message entirely, to enjoy the poetic justice of denying him the courtesy of a response just as he had denied me the courtesy of a graceful transition from the company I had helped build. But curiosity won out. What could William Parker possibly want from me now? I showed the email to Robert that evening. His eyebrows rose as he read it. Are you going to respond? I think I should, I said slowly. At minimum, I want to know what prompted this outreach. Just be careful, Robert cautioned. Corporate types like Parker rarely reach out unless they want something. The next morning, I sent a brief neutral reply agreeing to meet Parker for coffee the following week at a cafe equidistant from our respective offices. I deliberately chose a public setting rather than either company's territory. I mentioned the upcoming meeting to Rebecca during our regular update call. Her reaction was instant and vehement. Absolutely not, Eleanor. Do not meet with William Parker alone. NextGen must have gotten wind of your technology and its success with Veritas. They're likely looking to either steal your intellectual property or find a way to claim ownership of it based on your previous employment. All my development work was done on personal time with personal resources, I assured her. I was careful about that. Even so, Rebecca insisted, if you're determined to take this meeting, you need representation. I'm sending our IP attorney, David Kaplan, to accompany you. I started to protest, then reconsidered. Rebecca's concern wasn't unreasonable. William Parker had already demonstrated that he valued corporate interests over personal relationships or ethical considerations. Fine, I conceded. David can join us. The day of the meeting arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. I, dressed with particular care, a tailored pantsuit in deep burgundy, modest heels, minimal jewelry. Professional but confident, with no hint of the supplicant. David Kaplan met me outside the cafe 10 minutes before the appointed time. A sharp-featured man in his 50s with penetrating eyes and the contained energy of someone who enjoyed intellectual combat. We briefly reviewed potential scenarios and agreed on boundaries for the conversation. William Parker arrived precisely at the scheduled time, his tall figure impeccably attired in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He hesitated visibly when he saw that I wasn't alone. Eleanor, he greeted me with a stiff smile. I was hoping we could speak privately. William, this is David Kaplan, Meridian Ventures legal counsel, I replied calmly. Given the circumstances of my departure from NextGen, I thought it prudent to have representation present. A flash of annoyance crossed Parker's face before his corporate mask reasserted itself. Of course, understandable. He extended a hand to David, then turned back to me. You're looking well. The startup life seems to agree with you. I find purpose invigorating, I replied neutrally. What can I do for you, William? He signaled to the barista for coffee, before answering. I've been hearing interesting things about InteractRx. Your predictive modeling technology for drug interactions is generating quite a buzz in the industry, particularly after the Veritas pilot. News travels fast, I observed. In our world, it does. He accepted his coffee with a nod to the server. Especially when something potentially disruptive emerges. I waited, sipping my tea, refusing to fill the silence. NextGen is interested in exploring a collaboration, he finally continued. Your technology could significantly enhance our development pipeline, particularly for the peripheral neuropathy treatment you were overseeing before your transition. Before you pushed me out, I mentally corrected, but kept my expression neutral. I'm surprised you're interested in collaboration. When we last spoke, you seemed quite confident in NextGen's direction under its new leadership. Parker had the grace to look slightly discomfited. Business circumstances evolve. Michael Harris has made some unfortunate decisions regarding the peripheral neuropathy project. Development timelines have slipped, and preliminary safety data is concerning. So Michael was struggling. The knowledge brought me no satisfaction. The peripheral neuropathy treatment had been my project, my vision. Its delay meant suffering patients would wait longer for relief. That's regrettable, I said carefully. But I don't see how InteractRx can help at this stage. Our technology is designed for early phase development to identify potential interactions before clinical trials begin. We're considering reformulation, Parker explained, essentially restarting development with modifications to address the safety concerns. Your technology could help us expedite that process. David Kaplan cleared his throat. Mr. Parker, are you proposing a standard client relationship where NextGen would pay for InteractRx's services, or something else? Parker's gaze flicked between us. We were thinking of a more substantial partnership, perhaps an exclusivity agreement for specific therapeutic areas, or even a potential acquisition of InteractRx by NextGen, which would allow Dr. Bennett to return to the company in a leadership capacity. And there it was, the real purpose of this meeting. They wanted to reabsorb my innovation, bringing me back under their control. The irony was breathtaking. 4 months ago, I was redundant. Now, I was worth acquiring. William, I said evenly, I appreciate NextGen's interest in our technology. As one of several potential clients, we'd be happy to discuss how our services could benefit your development pipeline. But exclusivity or acquisition is not on the table. His expression hardened slightly. Eleanor, be reasonable. A startup like InteractRx faces significant challenges in scaling and market penetration. NextGen offers stability, resources, and immediate industry reach. My client has been clear, David interjected. InteractRx is not for sale. If you're interested in utilizing their services as a client, we can arrange for our business development team to follow up with details. Parker's mouth tightened into a thin line. I had hoped we could discuss this more collegially, given our history. Our history is precisely why this conversation is happening as it is, I pointed out. You terminated my position because, in your words, NextGen needed to position itself for the future. I've created my own future, William, one where I determine my company's direction and value. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Eleanor, I understand you may harbor some resentment about how things ended at NextGen. That's natural. But business is business. What happened wasn't personal. It felt quite personal when I was escorted from the building with a cardboard box, I replied evenly. But you're right about one thing. Business is business, and my business isn't for sale. The meeting ended shortly after, with Parker departing in barely disguised frustration. As David and I watched him stride away down the sidewalk, the attorney turned to me with newfound respect in his eyes. That, he said with satisfaction, was a masterclass in professional boundary setting. Rebecca will be delighted. As I drove home that afternoon, a quiet sense of vindication settled over me. William Parker, who had so casually discarded me, as irrelevant to NextGen's future, now wanted what I had built. But InteractRx wasn't just a company or a technology. It was proof that my value didn't diminish with age, that innovation wasn't the exclusive province of youth, that experience and wisdom were assets worth investing in. The circle had turned, and this time, I was the one determining who had a place at the table. News of William Parker's attempt to acquire InteractRx spread quickly through Boston's biotech community. I hadn't intended to publicize the meeting, but David Kaplan had reported back to Rebecca, who apparently mentioned it to several industry colleagues. By the following week, I had received calls from 3 journalists wanting to discuss the David versus Goliath narrative of a startup founded by a discarded executive now being courted by the company that had let her go. I declined all interview requests, preferring to keep our focus on building the technology rather than crafting a revenge narrative. But privately, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of having created something valuable enough that NextGen now wanted me back. The rejection of Parker's overture seemed to light a fire under him. The following month, NextGen announced a strategic initiative to develop their own predictive modeling system for drug interactions. According to industry sources, they had assembled a team led by none other than Michael Harris to fast-track the project. "They're trying to replicate your technology," Maya observed during our weekly strategy meeting. "Should we be concerned?" I shook my head. My algorithms represent decades of specialized knowledge and insight. They can throw resources at the problem, but they're starting from square one. We have a significant head start and deeper expertise. Plus, we have you, Samira added with a grin. And you've forgotten more about molecular interaction patterns than Michael Harris will ever know. Her confidence warmed me, but I took no chances. We accelerated our development timeline, pushing to refine and expand our platform's capabilities. The team worked long hours, fueled by a mixture of scientific passion and competitive determination. I often found myself at the office until 9 or 10 at night, losing track of time as I refined complex algorithms. Robert became a frequent presence in our office, bringing dinner for the team during late work sessions and offering a listening ear when technical challenges arose. Though he understood little of the scientific specifics, his humanistic perspective often helped us reframe problems in useful ways. "You've created quite a family here," he observed one evening, watching as Samira and Jeremy debated molecular visualization approaches, while Zoe organized takeout containers and Maya sketched marketing concepts. "I suppose I have," I realized. This team, this company, they had become more than colleagues. They were partners in a vision, believers in possibilities that others had dismissed. After the coldness of my departure from NextGen, the warmth of this new professional community felt like a homecoming. October brought our biggest milestone yet: the official launch of the InteractRx platform at the International Pharmaceutical Development Conference in San Francisco. As CEO, I would deliver the keynote presentation introducing our technology to the industry at large. Emma flew in from Baltimore to attend, her first real engagement with my new venture. I met her at the airport the day before the conference, anxious about her reaction but hopeful that seeing InteractRx in action might change her perspective. "Mom!" she called, waving as she emerged from the security area. We embraced, and I was struck by how much she resembled me at her age, the same determined set to her jaw, the same analytical gaze. "You look wonderful," I told her. "Tired, but wonderful." "Hospital hours," she shrugged. "You remember how it is? Though lately I've been thinking you might be working harder than I am. Dad says you're at the office all hours." I smiled as we walked toward baggage claim. It doesn't feel like work when you're building something you believe in. In the car, Emma studied me with her doctor's assessment. "You do look good, Mom. More energized than I've seen you in years, actually." "Is that surprise I hear?" I asked, navigating through San Francisco traffic. She had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Maybe a little. I was worried this venture might be too much stress, especially after what happened at NextGen. But you seem, I don't know, renewed. Somehow." "That's exactly how I feel," I admitted. "Like I've been given a chance to use everything I've learned in a whole new way, without constraints or corporate politics." "Dad says your technology is revolutionary, that it could change how medications are developed." "That's the goal," I confirmed. Faster, safer drug development means more effective treatments reaching patients sooner. The human impact could be enormous. Emma was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry I doubted you, Mom. I think I was so used to seeing you as stable, predictable, the corporate executive with the established career. When that changed, I defaulted to worry rather than considering that you might thrive in a completely different environment. Her honesty touched me deeply. Thank you for that. It means a lot to hear you say it. The next morning, as I prepared for my keynote address, Emma helped me review my presentation slides in my hotel room. Watching her analyze the scientific data with her physician's perspective reminded me powerfully of myself at her age. The same intensity, the same meticulous attention to detail. This predictive accuracy is remarkable, she said, studying a comparative chart. Have you considered applications for personalized medicine? Modeling how specific genetic profiles might affect drug interactions could be incredibly valuable for clinical practice. I smiled, pleased by her engagement. That's actually our Phase 2 development plan. We're focusing on standard interaction profiles first to establish the technology, but genotype-specific modeling is absolutely on our roadmap. She looked up, her expression thoughtful. You know, I have a colleague at Johns Hopkins who's developing an AI system for personalized cancer treatment protocols. There might be some interesting collaboration possibilities there. I'd love an introduction, I said, my mind already racing with possibilities. At the conference center, Emma sat in the front row as I took the stage before hundreds of pharmaceutical executives, researchers, and industry analysts, looking out at the sea of faces, many of whom had probably written me off as irrelevant just 6 months earlier. I felt a surge of quiet confidence. For decades, I began. Drug interaction testing has been one of the most time-consuming and expensive aspects of pharmaceutical development. The standard approach requires extensive laboratory testing for each potential interaction, a process that can take months and cost millions. At Interactrix, we asked a simple question. What if we could predict these interactions with high accuracy before a single test tube is prepared? For the next 40 minutes, I outlined our technology, its validation studies, and the transformative impact it could have on drug development timelines and safety profiles. The audience was rapt, with many taking detailed notes. When I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up across the auditorium. One question came from a familiar face in the third row, Dr. Alan Reeves from Veritas Pharmaceuticals, our first pilot partner. Dr. Bennett, could you share more about the results from our collaboration? The audience might be interested to know how your predictions compared to our traditional testing results. It was a perfect setup, whether intentional or not. I shared the Veritas data, highlighting the 94% prediction accuracy and the identification of interactions that might have been missed in conventional screening. As I concluded to enthusiastic applause, I caught sight of another familiar face slipping into the back of the hall. William Parker himself, watching with an unreadable expression. The remainder of the conference was a whirlwind of meetings, demonstrations, and networking. Our booth in the exhibition hall was consistently crowded with interested parties, from small biotech firms to large pharmaceutical companies. By the final day, we had scheduled follow-up meetings with 18 potential clients and had verbal commitments from 5 for pilot projects. The true surprise came at the closing reception. Emma and I were discussing the day's sessions over glasses of wine when Rebecca Goldman approached, accompanied by an elegant Asian woman I didn't recognize. "Eleanor, brilliant presentation," Rebecca greeted me. "The buzz is extraordinary. I'd like to introduce Dr. Mei Lin, CEO of Aster Pharmaceuticals." I nearly choked on my wine. Aster was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies globally, known for their innovative approaches and substantial research investments. "Dr. Bennett," Mei Lin extended her hand with a warm smile. "Your technology is impressive, very impressive. I wonder if you might join me for breakfast tomorrow to discuss potential collaboration opportunities." "I'd be delighted," I managed, suppressing my excitement. After they moved on, Emma raised an eyebrow. "Aster Pharmaceuticals? "Mom, do you realize what this could mean?" "It could mean nothing," I cautioned. "Or it could mean everything. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But the breakfast meeting exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Mei Lin didn't want just a pilot project or a client relationship. She proposed a strategic partnership. Aster would license our technology for exclusive use in specific therapeutic areas and provide substantial funding to accelerate our development of genotype-specific modeling. "We've been searching for exactly this kind of breakthrough," she explained, spreading a term sheet before me. "Your algorithm could reduce our development timelines by 30% while improving safety profiles. That translates to billions in potential value and, more importantly, treatments reaching patients significantly faster." The proposed terms were generous: $30 million for the license and development funding, with performance-based milestones that could add another $50 million over 5 years. InteractRx would maintain its independence and be free to work with other clients in non-competing therapeutic areas. "This is a substantial offer," I acknowledged. "I'll need to discuss it with my team and our investors." "Of course," May nodded. "But I should mention, we're not the only ones interested in your technology. I understand NextGen has made overtures." So she knew about Parker's acquisition attempt. News truly did travel fast in this industry. "They have," I confirmed, "but InteractRx isn't for sale." "I'm not looking to buy your company, Dr. Bennett," May clarified. "I'm looking to partner with it. There's a significant difference. We value what you've built and want to help it grow, not absorb it." I appreciated the distinction. It was precisely what set this offer apart from Parker's approach: respect for our independence rather than an attempt to reassert control. Back in Boston, I convened an emergency meeting with the InteractRx team and our Meridian investors to discuss Aster's proposal. The room hummed with excitement as I outlined the partnership structure. "This would transform our growth trajectory," Maya emphasized. "Aster's global reach and reputation would instantly elevate our profile with other potential clients. And the development funding would allow us to expand our team and accelerate the genotype-specific modeling," Samira added. "We could bring that to market at least 2 years earlier than our original timeline." Rebecca and her Meridian colleagues were equally enthusiastic. "This type of strategic partnership is the best of both worlds," she noted. "Major financial infusion and market validation without sacrificing your independence or future potential." By unanimous decision, we moved forward with the Aster partnership. The legal teams worked through November to finalize the agreement, with a planned announcement in early December. The news that InteractRx, a company barely 6 months old, had secured a $30 million strategic partnership with Aster Pharmaceuticals sent shockwaves through the biotech community. Our small office was flooded with congratulatory messages, partnership inquiries, and, inevitably, recruitment overtures for our team members from competitors scrambling to develop similar technology. William Parker's reaction came swiftly. He requested another meeting, this time at NextGen's headquarters, to present a competitive counteroffer. I declined politely but firmly, explaining that we were moving forward with Aster and were not interested in entertaining alternative partnerships in the same therapeutic areas. His response was less than gracious. Through industry channels, we heard that he had lambasted Michael Harris for failing to develop a comparable technology quickly enough, and had publicly questioned whether a startup led by a retirement-age CEO could deliver on its promises to Aster. The ageist jab might have stung months earlier, but now it felt petty and desperate. My age had become irrelevant in the face of what I had created. Or rather, its relevance had been transformed from liability to asset. My decades of experience had enabled me to identify a market need, develop a solution, and build a company around it with remarkable efficiency. December brought the formal announcement of our Aster partnership, accompanied by a feature in Biotech Innovator magazine highlighting disruptive technologies transforming pharmaceutical development. The article included a profile of me that focused not on my age but on my scientific contributions and entrepreneurial vision. Emma sent me the digital link with a simple message. "So proud of you, Mom. You're changing the world. Again." Daniel, too, had come around, calling after the announcement to offer his congratulations. "I should have known better than to underestimate you," he admitted. "You've never played by anyone else's rules." The holiday season arrived with a sense of triumph and vindication. Robert and I hosted a Christmas gathering at our home for the Interact RX team and their families, filling our house with laughter and celebration. As I looked around at these people who had believed in my vision when others had written me off, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Later that evening, after everyone had departed and Robert and I were cleaning up, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Dr. Bennett," a woman's voice greeted me when I answered. "This is Sandra Mitchell, chairperson of NextGen's board of directors. I apologize for calling during the holidays, but I was hoping we might arrange a meeting after the new year. There's an important matter I'd like to discuss with you personally." I nearly declined outright, assuming this was another acquisition attempt, but something in her tone gave me pause. "May I ask what this concerns?" "It's a sensitive matter regarding NextGen's leadership," she replied carefully. "I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Would you be available January 3rd? Curiosity won out. "Yes, I can make that work. After, we set a time and place." I related the conversation to Robert. He raised an eyebrow skeptically. "The board chairperson herself? That's interesting. What do you think she wants?" "I have no idea," I admitted, "but I'm certainly going to find out." The first week of January brought brutally cold weather to Boston, with snow piling in dirty heaps along the streets. I met Sandra Mitchell at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay, away from both NextGen and Interact RX offices. She was an impressive woman in her early 60s, with sharp eyes and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wielding significant power. After brief pleasantries, she got straight to the point. "Dr. Bennett, I'll be direct. The board is deeply concerned about NextGen's current direction under William Parker's leadership. The peripheral neuropathy project is now officially behind schedule by 18 months. 3 other key development programs are struggling. Our stock has dropped 17% in the past quarter." I listened without comment, curious where this was heading. "Meanwhile," she continued, "your company has secured a major partnership with Aster and is being hailed as a potential game changer in pharmaceutical development. The contrast is noteworthy." "I appreciate the information," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure why you're sharing it with me." Sandra set down her coffee cup with precision. "The board has lost confidence in William Parker. We're removing him as CEO, effective next month." I hadn't expected that. "I see. And you're telling me this because we want you to consider returning to NextGen, not as Director of Product Development, but as CEO." The proposal was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I had misheard her. "You want me to return as CEO? The same company that eliminated my position 6 months ago now wants me to lead it." "Yes," Sandra said simply. "The board recognized too late that Williams' restructuring initiatives damaged the company's innovative capacity. Your departure, in particular, created a vacuum of scientific leadership that hasn't been adequately filled." I sat back, processing this extraordinary reversal of fortune. "What about Interact RX?" "That's the most elegant part of our proposal," Sandra leaned forward. "NextGen would acquire Interact RX at a substantial premium to its current valuation. You would become CEO of NextGen, with your Interact RX team integrated into our structure and leadership positions. Your technology would become a cornerstone of NextGen's development approach." It was a breathtaking offer. Vindication, elevation, and financial reward all in one package. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Returning to the company that had discarded me, not as a supplicant, but as its leader. I'll need to think about this, I said finally, and discuss it with my team and investors. They've put their trust in me, and I won't make unilateral decisions that affect their futures. Of course, Sandra nodded. We'll send a formal offer for your consideration by the end of the week. And, Dr. Bennett, for what it's worth, I opposed your termination when William first proposed it. I thought it was short-sighted and potentially damaging to the company. I regret not fighting harder on that point. As I drove back to the InteractRx office, my mind raced with possibilities. The offer was undeniably attractive. Leading NextGen would provide the resources and reach to implement my vision on a much larger scale. The financial terms would likely be substantial, benefiting everyone who had taken a chance on InteractRx. But something about it didn't sit right. Returning to NextGen, even as CEO, meant re-entering the corporate structure I had recently escaped. It meant answering to a board, navigating shareholder expectations, dealing with the very political environment that had pushed me out in the first place. InteractRx, for all its limitations as a small company, was mine. I set its direction, its values, its priorities. We focused on innovation that could genuinely improve patients' lives, not quarterly earnings reports or stock prices. I shared the offer with Robert that evening. He listened thoughtfully as I outlined the pros and cons. It's an incredible vindication, he observed. Returning as CEO of the company that discarded you, it's the perfect revenge story. But is revenge what I want? I wondered aloud. Or do I want to build something truly mine, something that reflects my values without compromise? Only you can answer that, Robert said. But for what it's worth, I've never seen you as happy or fulfilled as you've been these past 6 months building InteractRx. I called an all-hands meeting the next day to share NextGen's offer with the team. Their reactions ranged from shock to excitement to concern. We'd all have positions at NextGen? Jeremy clarified. Yes, leadership roles with substantial autonomy, according to Sandra, I confirmed. But we wouldn't be InteractRx anymore, Samira pointed out. We'd be absorbed into NextGen's structure, subject to their corporate priorities and decision-making processes. The financial terms would be significant, I acknowledged, both for the company and for each of you personally as early employees with equity. Maya frowned. Money matters, but so does what we're building here. The culture, the mission, the independence. Those things have value too. I nodded. I want you all to think about this. Talk to your families. Consider what matters most to you professionally and personally. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss further. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Maylene at Astor. Eleanor, I've heard about NextGen's offer, she began without preamble. News truly did travel at light speed in this industry. Word gets around quickly, I observed. In our world, it does, she agreed. I'm calling because I want to ensure you understand the full picture before making your decision. If you accept NextGen's offer, our partnership agreement would require renegotiation. The board has concerns about our proprietary information being accessible to a direct competitor. It was a complication I hadn't fully considered. The Astor partnership was a cornerstone of InteractRx's current success and future potential. Jeopardizing it for NextGen's offer would be a significant risk. Thank you for the clarification, I said. That's valuable information for our decision-making process. The next day, I met individually with each team member before our group discussion. Their perspectives were thoughtful and varied, but a common theme emerged: pride in what we were, building independently, and concerns about being subsumed into a larger corporate structure. When we gathered for the full team meeting, I shared my own evolving thoughts. I founded InteractRx because I believed in the technology's potential to transform pharmaceutical development. But I also created it because I wanted to build something aligned with my values, scientific integrity, patient focus, and an environment where innovation thrives without corporate constraints. I looked around at the faces watching me intently. Returning to NextGen, even as CEO, would mean compromising some of that independence. Yes, we'd have more resources, but we'd also have shareholders, board politics, and quarterly earnings pressures. The very factors that led to my dismissal in the first place. Samira nodded. And what about our partnership with Aster? That's a bird in hand versus NextGen's two in the bush. Exactly, I agreed. After careful consideration, I'm inclined to decline NextGen's offer, but this affects all of you too, so I want your honest input. One by one, they shared their perspectives. While the financial potential of NextGen's offer was tempting, the consensus was clear. The team believed in what we were building at InteractRx and preferred to maintain our independence. So we stay the course, I concluded, feeling a sense of rightness settle over me. We build InteractRx into the company we envision, not a subsidiary of the organization that once deemed us dispensable. I called Sandra Mitchell the following morning to deliver our decision. Her disappointment was palpable. "Are you certain?" she pressed. "The offer we're preparing is extremely generous, and the opportunity to lead NextGen, to shape the future of a company you helped build, that's rare." "I appreciate the offer," I said sincerely. "But InteractRx is where my future lies. We're building something special, something that might not have existed if NextGen hadn't decided I was past my prime." After a pause, Sandra said, "I understand. For what it's worth, I think you're making a powerful statement. And I suspect you'll force us to regret this missed opportunity even more than we already regret losing you the first time." News of my decision spread quickly through industry channels. The narrative proved irresistible to the biotech press. The executive pushed out at 60 who built her own successful company, then declined to return as CEO of the organization that had discarded her. Bio Entrepreneur magazine requested an in-depth interview, which I carefully considered before accepting. The resulting cover story, "The Innovation Renaissance: Why Experience Matters in Biotech Leadership," positioned me not as an anomaly, but as a harbinger of changing perspectives on age and innovation. Dr. Bennett's journey challenges entrenched assumptions about career trajectories and productive years, the article concluded. Her success raises important questions about how many other experienced innovators are being prematurely sidelined, and what breakthroughs we might be missing as a result. The article prompted a flurry of speaking invitations from industry conferences and university business programs. I accepted selectively, using these platforms to advocate for recognition of the value that experienced scientists and executives bring to innovation. By the one-year anniversary of InteractRx's founding, we had grown to 22 employees, secured partnerships with 7 pharmaceutical companies, and were cash flow positive, a rare achievement for such a young biotech firm. Our technology had already contributed to accelerated development timelines for 3 promising medications, potentially bringing treatments to patients months or years earlier than traditional approaches would allow. William Parker's tenure at NextGen ended abruptly in March, with the company announcing his resignation to pursue other opportunities, the corporate equivalent of being shown the door. Michael Harris departed shortly after, joining a smaller competitor in a lateral move that industry observers recognized as a step down. Sandra Mitchell called again after these changes. "The offer to return as CEO remains open, Eleanor. The board still believes you're the right person to lead NextGen's revitalization." "I'm flattered," I told her honestly, "but my answer remains the same. My future is with InteractRx." "I expected as much," she admitted, "but I had to try. You've built something remarkable in an astonishingly short time. NextGen's loss has truly been healthcare innovation's gain." On a warm evening in May, exactly 1 year after my unceremonious departure from NextGen with a cardboard box of personal effects, the InteractRx team gathered on the rooftop deck of our new offices in Cambridge. As CEO, I raised a glass to toast our collective achievement. 1 year ago, I was told I was no longer relevant to the future of pharmaceutical development. I began, looking around at the faces of colleagues who had become friends. Today, we're helping shape that future on our own terms. We're proving that innovation isn't limited by age or conventional expectations. I raised my glass higher, to interactory, to second acts, and to the wisdom that comes from experience, the greatest competitive advantage of all. As the sun set over the Boston skyline, casting a golden glow across our gathering, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey from that humiliating day in William Parker's office to this moment of triumph hadn't been easy. It had required courage, resilience, and a willingness to reimagine what was possible at 60. But the rewards had exceeded anything I could have anticipated. Not just professional success or financial security, but the deeper satisfaction of creating something meaningful entirely on my own terms, of proving that innovation and contribution don't have an expiration date, of showing my children, and perhaps more importantly myself, that being 60 wasn't an ending but a powerful new beginning. The company that had deemed me obsolete now wanted me back to lead them. But I had found something better. The freedom to define my own value, to build my own legacy, and to demonstrate through action rather than argument that experience, wisdom, and determination are assets that appreciate rather than diminish with time. As Robert joined me at the railing, slipping his arm around my waist, I leaned into his familiar embrace. "Happy?" he asked simply. I nodded, watching the vibrant team we had assembled, young and mid-career scientists and business professionals all working together, valuing each other's contributions regardless of age or background. "Beyond happy," I told him. "Grateful. For the push I needed to discover what I'm truly capable of. For the chance to build something that reflects my values. And for you, believing in me even when I doubted myself." "I never doubted," he said quietly. "Not for a moment." We stood, together as twilight deepened, watching the lights of Boston flicker to life against the darkening sky. Ahead lay challenges and opportunities I couldn't yet imagine, a future I was helping to shape rather than merely witnessing. At 61, I wasn't approaching the end of my professional journey. I was embarking on its most meaningful chapter. Sometimes, I reflected, what looks like an ending is merely a necessary transition. Sometimes being pushed out of one door is exactly what you need to find the courage to open another. And sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make isn't accepting the vindication others offer, but creating a new path that renders their validation unnecessary. The company that had once dismissed me as irrelevant to their future had proved themselves irrelevant to mine. And in that revelation lay the most satisfying victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out!